Can you start by stating your name and what job you did with Trinity House?
Yeah, I'm Mike Hicks, son of George Hicks, and we held a contract with Trinity House from 1952, still hold one today actually. My father had it up until he passed away in 1980, and I took it over in 1980. The contract now is really providing a standby service for whatever emergency might crop up. We serviced with the original contract Round Island and Bishop Rock lighthouses mainly, but occasionally we were called in to do trips to Seven Stones. We've done several reliefs of the Seven Stone lightship when it was manned, but our main contract was for Round Island reliefs and reliefs to the Bishop Rock Lighthouse. Bishop Rock was every 29th day, and the keepers then in 1952 up until 1965, when they did a modernisation programme, they did 2 months on the lighthouse with a month ashore. The longest overdue we had was 6 weeks, which meant that some of the men had actually done 3.5 months there at one stage, which is quite a spell to be on a tower. Well, the Bishop was the biggest tower that Trinity possessed, and men didn't seem to mind being on there for long periods. More room to move around on that than there were on lighthouses like the Wolf, but quite an exposed light, surrounded by reasonably deep water. But we used to do it, the relief would be done sometimes in extremely rough conditions, heavy rise and fall, a lot of breaking sea, and not a lot of fun all the time for the keepers. We were fairly confident in what we were doing, and I mean, in the early days all we had was a bowline on the bight, a loop in the rope, and the men used to put their foot in it and away to go. Laterally with a safety executive and everything, men used to go in a harness, but we always felt that the harness was slightly more hazardous because although they had a quick release do on it, it was never always that efficient, I didn't think. And sometimes the quick release, if you were pulling a man in a boat in extremely rough weather, sometimes it was a job to get him free, whereas if he had his foot in the rope and just hanging on, I mean, he stepped off at the appropriate moment and everything was all right. But in 1952, when we landed there, we would take everything down. We would take oil, paraffin, coal, and diesel oil down for the engines, and everything had to be taken out in the way of food. Because there was no fridges or freezers as such then. All they had was coal cupboards, really. So we took literally everything down, nothing very much in the way of frozen, because it was mainly tinned and that type of food. And we would do a fortnightly basket boat too. Every 14 days we would run a basket boat down, but that was a privilege that we afforded to the keepers actually. I mean, Trinity didn't pay us for that. It was just there was a little figure we got for that. It was never a financial gain to us. I mean, we did it to provide the service to the keepers, and that went right away through until 1977 when the helicopters relieved. But 65. They started the month and month about business, when the keepers would go on for a month and off for a month, and that was much more friendly for them. They could spend 6 months home with their families instead of 4. One of the things that used to strike me most, being a family man, I got a family of 5 children, and in the early days doing the Bishop, when a relief would come around Christmas time, and you were taking the men out, family men up from the Trinity cottages and taking them out to the Bishop come sort of 18th, 19th, 20th, even 21st or 22nd of December, and everybody here was getting all Christmassy-fied and getting ready to roll. and you would go down there and put them out there for 2 months. It always seemed a bit of a strain to me that they were going to go out there and miss the family Christmas, but they seemed quite philosophical about it. They would all sort of have their little Christmas party prior to going, or those that were on board would wait until they actually came ashore if the relief happened to come just after the Christmas celebrations, which sometimes it did. But all in all, we never had any serious mishaps. One or two duckings for some of the food and stuff we were putting up, but generally things went up very well. They were always slung up in canvas bags, and we had canvas covers to cover the stuff over going out on the rough days when there was lots of spray and rain coming down aboard. And I think generally we managed quite well. There was usually 3 of us on relief, from my father, myself, and one other helper. And it took that, because the relief could take up to about, anything from 2 to 2.5, 3 hours sometimes, to actually land all the stuff and take off the stuff that was coming ashore. Because having 3 keepers, one relief you would have 2 keepers go ashore and 2 keepers out, so it meant a double whack of stuff to go that particular month, and the boat would be rigged up with stuff. The following month would be an easier relief because there would be only one each way, and that made life a lot easier. But then in 1977 the helicopter relief started, and that made a tremendous difference. And we used to take working personnel down and land between reliefs. Any sickness or anything, we would transfer keepers or personnel by boat, breeches buoy affair, and transport them to St Mary's. But that's about it really. Round Island was similar. Round Island was a lot easier to cope with most of the time, but all the landing was sheltered up there. The sea conditions that we used to do it in from time to time, it could be pretty hairy up there. But it meant actually landing the keepers with a small dinghy. We would tow a dinghy with us. They would load the stuff into a box that was sent down from overhead. They had overhead hoist there on Round Island, and the box would be lowered down to the boat, and everything would be pulled up on the box and landed up on the top of the lighthouse. It saved carrying them up, nearly 180 odd feet above sea level, so a lot of steps to carry heavy gear up. So everything would be transported up, and then the keepers only had to walk up to the top when the relief was affected, and that went quite well. But we've had 1 or 2 hairy reliefs up there, and then automation started to take effect, and Round Island was we lost the relief of Round Island, I suppose, in about the mid-60s, and Trinity started doing that themselves, mainly because of the cottage accommodation. They had cottages spare on the mainland, so the Round Island keepers used to come off and go back to the mainland, and the Trinity house, either Stella or Patricia, not the Patricia, Stella or the Churchill. Originally when we started there was the Warden and the Satellite. They were the two Trinity house vessels, but they would ship them that way then, and we were just left with the Trinity cottages occupying the Bishop Lighthouse Keepers. But then Round Island, they went fully automated, I suppose in the mid-80s. Men were taken off there, and that became a fully automated station. And then in 1992 the Bishop Rock became fully automated. And now the only request we get down there, if they've got personnel down there working for any period of time, they need to be taken down by helicopter. We've got no means of access by sea now, unless there's somebody on the tower to actually tend the boat. That was another thing we found got a little bit troublesome. The more and more they used the helicopter, the less and less familiar the keepers and the personnel aboard were used to handling the ropes and rigging the tackle and being able to get the boat tended to properly. And that restricted the sort of weather conditions that we could actually do the reliefs in, and any work that we could do in, because you know, from the safety point of view. So we tended to be a bit more choosy the weather conditions that we went out there in. It used to be much more settled weather then than originally when we used to go down, when the lighthouse was fully manned and everybody knew what they should be doing. One of the big first improvements they made to the Bishop in the mid-60s was they took the old jack roll out. That was a winch that used to operate from down on the set-off. The set-off is the first sort of area to land on the Bishop. That's the plinth at the bottom. And the men used to stand down there to tend the relief boat. And they were about 40 feet above sea level and in shouting distance really. And they could wind the winch up. It was all hydraulic really, through a pulley right up at the top of the tower. So two keepers would be down on the set-off, and they would wind the relieving keepers up first, and then everybody would wind all the kit out of the boat. Sometimes there was, you know, probably a couple of ton of gear that would have to go up. And at the end of that, we would take the keepers off and any stuff they wanted to take ashore with them. And that was all done, as I say, with this jack roll. It was a big wooden drum with a rope leading around it, hemp rope. And that was all fairly gentle. And the first modernisation they did, they put a steel hawser in with an electric winch, and the controls of the electric winch were put right up on the top of the gantry, right up on by the lantern itself. So the chap that was operating that was probably 170 feet away from the boat above us, so he was out of shouting range. And even in the finest of weather conditions you couldn't really shout to them. But fortunately communications had improved in as much as we had VHF radios, and they had handheld radios on the rock. We could talk to them from the boat and they could talk to us. That was one of the marked improvements as well, because originally when we started doing the reliefs there was no communication at all. I mean, other than the keepers would know approximately when we were due out, and they would keep an eye open for the boat, and they would rig the tackle ready for when we arrived down at the Bishop. They knew what to be expecting. But as time went on, the first bit of communication was the VHF radio, and the VHF was a great improvement because we had them on the boats and we could talk to the lighthouses instead of the MF bands that the lighthouses could talk to one another. And then I suppose in the sometime in the mid-70s telephone connections were made, and the mid to late 70s we could actually telephone them and speak to them by telephone, so that was a big improvement as well. But we go down there now and the tower just stands there and completely unmanned. It seems a bit of a shame really. It's you know, some of these things are for the best, but I'm not sure that it's nice to actually see these towers and the stations like Round Island completely unmanned now. Round Island is starting to look a little bit tatty, you know. I would hope that Trinity will find enough money and resources to actually keep it in a good state of repair, and likewise the Bishop really. Well, the Bishop is solid granite and bronze outside, but you know, I think the appearance of it is all important. So one hopes that they will keep it all in good repair and look after what has been a fine institution in the past, I think.
Right, thanks a lot.
That's junior. Well, I senior now, the old man's dead now, you know. And well, we've done a release, been in the family for 50 years.
What lighthouse was this?
Longships Lighthouse. And my grandfather, he took it over in, I suppose in the in the early, I can't remember really, I suppose in the early 30s.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then he carried on with it, and then my father carried on with it, and when my father retired, I carried on it. But they used to do it, they used to complete it, you know. Oil, coal, water and explosive, and do the reliefs as well. But when I took it over, we used to only do the reliefs.
Yeah.
And the Stella, she used to fill it with oil and stuff then, you know. and then it come automatic. Then you know, at three listers out. We took out 3 listers, and they put 3 listers in. Then you know.
Can you describe when your granddad did it? Was it by rowing?
No, by motor.
Yeah.
Well, boy James, 26 foot long and 12 Kelvin.
Yeah. And what was the relief? Was it winch or step ashore or what?
Well, sometimes they step ashore, and some was by you know, up in the davits, you know.
So how did it work?
Well, you used to put your foot in the bowline, and the 3 keepers up on the top. They used to winch them up, you see.
Yeah. What sort of reliefs have you done?
Oh, some very dirty ones sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially winter time. Very dirty job it was winter time.
Can you explain them?
Well, it's a job to get out there sometimes winter time, and the chaps that's out there, they wanted to come in, you see, and they wanted to force the pace, you know, more than the water was fit to do sometimes, you know.
So you've had some really rough
Oh,
ones.
some really rough ones.
Ever dropped anybody in the water?
Well, 1 or 2 have dropped in the water, but never had no major accidents, you know.
Yeah. And your boat, is it, when you did it 25 years ago, how different was it from when your dad and your granddad did it?
Oh Christ, it was a long way different then, you know. When we do it, we had a bigger boat and diesel engines and all then, you know, and we used to drop off in a 15-foot rowing boat and take them into the Rock Out Road, you know. We could do it that road, step off in the bridges, low water, when they couldn't do it no other way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about overdues with rough weather out?
Oh, they stay out 2 months at a time, you know, but the relief was every month, you know. The relief was every month,
Yeah.
and well, sometimes if they go over there 2 months, very long, used to be a loss relief,
Yeah.
and well, they have been loss relief, you know. Changed a lot. I would change the 3 keepers over, you know, but odd times, you know.
Have you ever been scared going in a boatman?
Well, yeah. Well, man's always scared, isn't it? Man's always a bit nervous, you know,
Yeah.
when you see the breakers coming across, you know.
Have they ever lost anybody yet?
No, never lost a soul. Never had an accident. They were for 50 years.
When your granddad did it, you said he oiled and watered the place.
Yeah, he oil, watered the place, everything.
So, what did that involve? Loads of trips?
Loads of trips, yeah.
And,
Yeah,
And coal as well?
coal as well. They used to take out about 45-gallon drums of oil to a go, you know.
Yeah.
Then they used to throw them up on the landing. Then from the landing they used to winch them up in the oil room.
Yeah.
They used to take up 4 at a time on the landing, and 2 at a time up to the gallery, you know, up to the window. You know the windows, don't you?
Yeah.
Well, they used to hoist them up to the window, and 1 man would take them in the window, you know.
And how long would that take?
Oh, you'd take all afternoon if you take out 40 drums, you know.
Yeah.
You used to take all afternoon to do land 40 drums. She used to take them out the cove store, take them down to the breakwater, lower them down in the boat, and so forth, you know. It's an all afternoon job, you know.
How long have you been retired?
Me, 2 years. 2 years. 2 years. October coming.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And that's from doing the boats?
that's for fishing. I was a fisherman, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you've seen a few storms over the Longships?
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, I suppose we've packed up from the Longships now since the helicopter. How long has the helicopter been doing of it?
Oh, a few years now, isn't it?
20 years.
Yeah. Probably, yeah.
Well, we packed up then. 20 years.
Did anybody ever row out to do reliefs?
Yeah. Yeah, my father, he rowed the small boat out and done the relief on his own sometimes, you know, when we've been fishing, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, he done it on his own sometimes, you know.
Yeah. What sort of year or era was your granddad when he did the boats?
Oh, he's quite oldish man when he used to do it, you know. Yeah, he was in his 70s when he packed up, you know.
Yeah?
Yeah, the oldish man he was. He lived to be an old man, he did, 86, you know. And he was in his 70s when he used to do it with my father, you know.
And was he a fisherman as well?
Yeah, old fisherman.
How-
Old fisherman.
And they were involved in a lifeboat as well, weren't they?
Yeah. In them times, you know.
Yeah.
That's going back, oh Christ, what shall I say, 60 years, I suppose.
Yeah. What sort of keepers can you remember that you took out there?
Oh my God. Oh, what? Jack Ellis, we took Jack Ellis out. And another one called Smith. Oh, I can't remember them all, you know. I took all Bloor out any amount of times, you know.
Yeah.
And Jack Hayes took he out any amount of times, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. I suppose Jack Hayes, he know them all, don't he?
I don't know.
He know them all.
Yeah.
Yeah. Took Jack Hayes out. And oh Christ, pile of them. I can't remember them all now, you know.
Yeah.
I'm going back, oh, why, 40 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going back 40 years, I can't remember them all, you know.
Right, whose boat is that in the photograph?
This is my grandfather and my father's boat.
So,
The boy James.
yeah.
PZ4, PZ143.
And where's your dad and where's your granddad in the picture?
This is my granddad in the back,
Yeah.
and this is my father here on the front.
Yeah. And that's how they used to do the relief.
That's how they used to do the leaves, oil and coal.